Florida State has its transfer portal quarterback.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's show is 100% about Florida State's newest transfer portal commitment, quarterback Thomas Castellanos, by way of UCF and most recently Boston College. Want to discuss his statistics and stuff here in a moment. And we're also going to discuss the long term. I want to give 7 questions that I want you, the Florida State fans, to answer and comment on YouTube, etc. Hit me up on X at FBScout_Florida. If you have anything, I've got a poll that I'm going to share here in a little bit that I just put up talking about NIL and stuff too. So you can check that out. But Florida State has a unique player. I want to give a backdrop to who he is because I've known him since I've seen him play 7-on-7. I've seen him play high school games, all the backdrop with him, statistics and everything else. And we're going to start with those statistics here in just a moment. I do believe that Florida State is getting a player that really fits Gus Malzahn's offense. So here are the numbers. 2 things, though. I'm going to give his passing numbers for this past season, rushing numbers for 2023, and I'll explain why as I go through. This past year in Bill O'Brien's pro-style offense, keep that in mind, at Boston College, they've got some good talent at receiver and running back, but they don't have anybody elite. Like Zay Flowers played there. They don't have a guy like that right now. So 99 of 161 in 8 games, 61.5%, 1,366 yards, 8.5 yards per passing attempt, 18 touchdown passes, and 5 interceptions. Keep in mind, again, Bill O'Brien, if you remember back or didn't know, he was the quarterback coach at New England when they had a guy by the name of Tom Brady. He was at Penn State a little over a decade ago when they came off the wild or going through the wild probation. He had a pure pocket passer, very similar to Tom Brady. That's what he knows. That's what he does. So Thomas doesn't fit that as well, but he still did adapt pretty well, better than I thought he would, to be honest. That being the case, Thomas is most likely to flourish when he does the following: quarterback draws, quarterback lead, quarterback power, and then has more freedom to scramble. I don't know their rules, and I'm not sitting in Boston College's quarterback room in their offensive meetings, but I'm sure they have rules about how long you wait before you take off, etc., based on it being truly a structured system. I don't think, again, that's best. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I assume they do. They really want him, unless somebody's just truly in his face, to stick in the pocket. Thomas does his best work often outside the pocket on the run, whether throwing or running, and making yardage. That being the case, I think it's interesting that he went from a guy that had 15 touchdowns and 14 picks as a sophomore, because he was wild, to 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions his next season. It shows growth. It shows maturity. So that's a really interesting statistic. Also, this year on third downs, he was, again, this good players to throw to, but not elite. 32 out of 55, 58.2%, 411 yards, 4 TDs, only 1 interception, 7.5 yards per passing attempt. 2023 rushing stats, this is where it's really wild. When he is let loose, again, as Florida State probably remembers, if you're a Noles fan, that game was not what you wanted. The Noles didn't come into that game mentally focused, and Castellanos did a great job of making them pay. 215 attempts, 1,113 yards rushing, 5.2 yards per attempt, and 13 TDs. To make it very clear, if you haven't really watched him play much or if at all, he was recruited by Florida State, Clemson, Georgia, etc. Everybody wanted him at a different skill spot. Some receiver, some running back, some defensive back. I thought he was as good a corner as I saw in the 7-on-7 circuit. Extremely strong and incredible lateral quickness. I saw him go against a pretty good receiver once, and he jammed him so hard at the line, he pushed the guy behind the line of scrimmage. He's a very gifted athlete. So, I mean, you could put him at running back at Florida State. He could go get 1,000 yards on 200 carries, no problem. Wouldn't be surprised if he hit 1,300 or 1,400 yards. Like, he's that explosive. You can compare him to anybody across college football, Genty, Scattaboo, Jeremiah Love, whatever. He's got a little bit of all those kinds of qualities as a runner, elite athleticism. And I mean that sincerely. Like, that's not a hyperbole at all. He is an elite college football athlete. So the next question with him is why quarterback, etc. That's just what he always told me he wanted to play, and that's why he picked UCF in the first place. That was his decision. Didn't work out there. He transfers to Boston College for the last 2 seasons. Haven't talked to him since, but I do know that he is a guy that's steadfast. Well, something's really changed on being a quarterback, but I think he knows his fit. He's got at least 1 more season and 2 really, because he redshirted his first year at UCF to make that happen. In Florida State under Gus Malzahn, an offense that he knows can really be something where he's spectacular if given the opportunity. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about 7 questions that I think most FSU fans would want to know about. I'm going to give my answers. And I also want you, if you're on YouTube, comment on them. And if you have additional questions, by all means, fire away. We will get to that next here on Locked On Seminoles. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the National Football League in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. 7 questions about Thomas Castellanos that I think are important. So these will kind of give a baseline of who he is and add to some of the points and stats that I provided earlier in the show. Can he rush for 1,000 yards for Florida State? This is the easiest one. If he is healthy and he plays 12 games next year, and I fully expect him to be the starter, it would surprise me if he did not. The only caveat to that is if they really tried to avoid him taking too many hits. It's negotiable. But at 200 carries, with an emphasis on Thomas getting an opportunity to run the football, it would shock me if he did not run for 1,000. Now, 2 things there. What's the offensive line going to look like? Because if it's not very good, then maybe I'm wrong. But Florida State's obviously struggling there. We got to see how the portal works out. That's a long-term thing, and that won't be known until the summer when all this stuff's done. Remember, there's a second portal window after spring practice. So we're a long way away from having an idea what Florida State's O-line is going to be. And secondarily, when you look at the offense, how are they going to structure it? Are they going to have one running back that's bell cow? Like, is it Cam Davis? Are they going to rotate guys? How they want to do that? So they could mix it up and have 3 or 4 guys run for 800 yards. And maybe he stays under 1,000 that way and they protect Castellanos. But physically, again, it's not debatable. Elite college football athlete. He could literally right now transfer to Bama, Texas, Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, Miami, anywhere. If he played running back, he could be their #1 and be a stud or at least compete for that job. Very, very elusive player, speed, size, power, all of it. So he is explosive and he will change Florida State's offense for the better. Number 2, how does he change what a defense does when they go against Florida State? This is where it's so much fun to talk because it's the one's discretion. Talking to coaches around the country, whether high school or college, they hate running quarterbacks when they're on the defensive side of the equation. They want to have things set and locked. I've talked to numerous coaches this year going up against a team that has a mobile quarterback, even if he wasn't a D1 kid. But let me put it to you like this. I spoke to a coach this year, the guy at Bowdoin High School in Georgia. They got a kid that Florida State's recruiting. It's a junior and everybody's recruiting. So I go to the game, but the other team had a mobile quarterback that's going to Notre Dame. He's elite speed, 10,400 meter kid. And their team wasn't good. Their O-line stunk, but he was still scared to death. And this was a 2-time defending state champion at the time, blah, blah, blah. They had a good defense, super disciplined. he was still scared to death of the kid because he ran 10-4. Now, Thomas, I don't think is that fast, but he wasn't as elusive as Thomas. He's not near as strong, etc. And he's 175 pounds. They know that even if they use a spy, and we talked about some of this, that you can get beat when you do everything else schematically correct. It's because the kid makes you miss. Now, let's add that to Thomas. You're talking about a guy that's going out and can stiff arm you like a running back, has incredible lateral quickness. So how does a defense prepare for that? Because he can really throw the deep ball, especially. He's got a cannon for an arm. He'll throw a laser, and he's learned to walk the ball more and give his guys a chance. So I think teams are going to have to mix it up. If you're just a straight, like just use an easy example, Iowa, are obviously very well coached on defense, that runs cover 2, that won't work against him because it'll be 2nd and 4 all day. Quarterback option, quarterback draws, check downs, basic RPOs into the flat. They can tear that up with an elite athlete. If you think about the Big Ten West over the last 10 or so years, there weren't many guys even in the same stratosphere as Castellanos. That's why Iowa could play that kind of defense, and they're still great, don't get me wrong. But they would struggle against a guy like him. Secondarily, with this, he's gotten better as a passer, as the numbers again. He only had 5 picks this year, and he's a much more consistent passer from the pocket. So if you just sit back and play a cloud coverage or cover 2, you're going to have more of a difficult time keeping the football in front of you and not making it easy 2nd down and 3rd downs that are short yardage because they'll stay ahead of the chains. Florida State should be in good situation. Third, can Thomas Castellanos be an accurate passer from the pocket? Yes and no. This is where the O-line part, this is the hardest question for me, really has to come into focus to know. But I wanted to broach the question because, quite frankly, Thomas Castellanos is such an athlete. I know he's going to break contain and make some plays that other guys don't. But there are situations, especially the end of a half, the end of a game, you got to throw it. Can he be consistently accurate? He hasn't always been, but he's improved vastly from his sophomore to junior year, just watching film and seeing him play this year. I think he can. Now the question is more really what's around him. Obviously, Florida State's receiver room has got to get a lot better, and so does the offensive line. Those are obvious. But if they give him 1 or 2 guys that are really good athletes to get the ball to at the receiver position, running back, Florida State should be good. And they got obviously Landon Thomas and Mark Williams. They should be in a situation where he can be at least consistent, throw over 60%. And the key here isn't what Thomas does. It's what happens after the ball is in the hands of the playmakers. Think about Florida State historically. Name a school in the last 30 years that's had more guys, even whether they were NFL players or not, that just made guys miss. Florida State's got to get back to that. They got to get some more of those guys. And please catch the football. I know I'll speak for Thomas there. That is a must. What type of skill does he need? Just to add on this, and this was a question that I brought up to be more specific here, they got to have somebody that's a deep threat, that's a consistent guy. They don't necessarily need a number 1, but it would be preferred, obviously. But they must be able to stretch the field vertically. You're not utilizing Thomas's arm and his overall ability unless you do. Gus's offense, and I know Gus from covering UCF, they're going to run a ton of screens and put you in difficult spots. Florida State's got a few guys that can do that. I'm really curious what they'll do with Jalen Lucas, by the way, when he gets back healthy. But they got to have somebody that's a deep threat, that's a consistent player in 50-50 type situations. Gus is not shy about throwing it down the field, and Thomas's arm will absolutely get the ball there. If they can get somebody to do that consistently, it could be Hakeem, could be a transfer, it could be a combination. Florida State's offense could be dynamic. It's really going to be important that the wide receiver position takes a major step up. Next, number 5, what does he need to work on the most? It's the 2 things that almost every quarterback do. It's the lifelong learning skills, as I call them. Pocket presence, post-snap reads. Now, Gus's offense is primarily RPO, but that doesn't mean there aren't post-snap reads. There are 1,000,000% are. Sometimes it's just a straight drop back, even though you're in shotgun, and you read the defense. That never changes. Secondarily, sometimes in his career, and he's, again, gotten better at this, Thomas would leave the pocket. There's a bubble. If there's nobody in your face, stay there, keep eyes downfield, make a throw. It sounds really easy. But as bad as Florida State's O-line is, and I think it impacted all 3 of the guys that played quarterback for Florida State this year, eyes come down, you lose your sight of the receivers and the DBs and the linebackers, even for a second, it's hard to pick it back up when you look up, especially if somebody's closing in on you and then the play fails. Sometimes Thomas can do that. And again, he's not the biggest guy either. He's 5'10", about 195, 200 pounds. He's rocked up, but he's not a tall guy. He must do his best job to keep a clear view of the field. And if he has to escape to do that, so be it. But he can't have happy feet and weave a clean pocket. That is something most young quarterbacks struggle with. And at times in his career, Thomas Castellanos certainly has done that. Number 6, will Florida State's run game benefit overall? This is fun. This question I love because there's so much about what he does, even when he's not going to be the primary ball carrier, that, again, the other team has to think about. As I mentioned earlier, when I was talking to the Bowden coach, you don't know what that guy's going to do. There can be a bust. There could be a quarterback fumble where he drops a snap and he decides to take off and he makes a play. There's no coaching against that. So teams have to change what they do, and that impacts all your other players because they're benefited. The eyeballs of a guy that's in man coverage on your line or on your tight end, like Landon Thomas, who's, I think, an NFL player. If he keeps his eyes in the backfield too long, Landon runs by him, Thomas throws in the ball. Again, this is not rocket science. You're worried about Thomas's feet. When you are, if you are not disciplined 100% of the time, you can get smoked. This is why the RPO game is so wild and so difficult to stop. If you have somebody that truly understands it, kind of like Nick Marshall did for Gus when he was at Auburn in 2013. If you remember, for Noles fans that were old enough to remember the game, Florida State played Auburn in the national title game, and Auburn should have won. They were up at half. They were playing much better. Florida State made a great rally at the end, but Nick Marshall was a pain to deal with. Castellanos is a much stronger football player. Now, Marshall played corner in the NFL. He's a great athlete, but he wasn't as physically gifted in terms of power, and I really don't think there's a lot of difference in twitchiness. Castellanos has the ability to be that kind of guy. He's going to play in the NFL in something. I don't know what spot it's going to be, but he's going to play in the NFL. And this is the kind of guy that teams are going to have to struggle on how they come up and take something away from Florida State. Because if you double somebody, that means Castellanos is constantly one-on-one and just in a shell. I'll take him every time in one-on-one scenarios against a D-end or a linebacker in space. I'm not trying to pick on anybody. I'm just being real. Seeing him at the high school level and even at UCF practice, etc., he makes most college athletes look bad in one-on-ones. That's who he is. So you're going to see running backs for Florida State, Sam Singleton, a speed guy. If they come down hard on Castellanos and they overreact to him, pitch out to somebody as fast as Sam, that can be an 85-yard touchdown right out the gate. You have to be disciplined facing him. So Cam Davis, Sam Singleton, Jalen Lucas, all the running backs for Florida State, and even receivers on reverses, because that's something else Gus is really good with, is setting up plays. He'll run RPO, sweeps, different things with the quarterback, and then he'll run a pitch to the slot or something, and they'll hit big plays. All the guys that carry the football will benefit for the Florida State Seminoles. 6 is the run game, but 7 is the one that I'm going to kind of leave up to you. I'm going to give a short synopsis. Other benefits to Castellanos. This is more game management, and you can take this however you want. But Florida State's defense will be on the field less. You'll be able to chew up the clock and run the football and convert more third downs. You'll still be able to hit big plays. They'll have a few drives that are 50 seconds next season because he'll throw a bomb or run it in for a touchdown or set one of his teammates up for a big run. But you can play 4-minute offense if you want, or even more. I've seen drives where they go 6-7 plays and they get past midfield and then they just grind on teams because everybody's worried about Castellanos. It'll be 2nd down and 4 over and over again, and the defense gets tired. And your defense is resting. That's huge. I also think red zone with him because of RPO and ball fakes and all the different positions that you can utilize in the run game when you've got a mobile quarterback will be beneficial. Florida State will absolutely be one of the better red zone teams in terms of what they can do in ball handling. That doesn't mean it's going to be perfect because, again, you still got to have a good O-line. We need to see what's going to happen with that. But the play structure is proven under Gus Malzahn when he's got a truly talented quarterback. So this is a young man that can benefit. Finally, with this, I just think in clutch situations, Thomas Castellanos could be a really, really good football player. I just think he is. He's got a competitive nature. So that will become to Florida State. And you just need that in general. That's not a situational or a play style. you need a competitor at quarterback, especially if he's going to be running. He'll run over somebody on 4th and 1. I can guarantee it. Thomas is not afraid. He is that guy. Most of the time he's going to make a miss, but if it's needed at the corner of the end zone at the pylon, you better be the low man because Thomas Castellanos is very, very strong, and he is not going to be coming slow. He's very, very fast. That's not going to be an easy tackle for a defender. With that, thank you very much for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. You can find this podcast wherever you get your pods for free. Take it with you, download it, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, YouTube, anywhere you want to go. So please come back and see us again tomorrow. Thank you very much and take care.